My name's Casey, and I'm 29. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who cut off family, but here we are. Let me rewind a bit. When I was 17, my mom kicked me out. Not because I was using drugs or breaking laws, no. I got thrown out because I had a boyfriend. That was it. She found out I was dating a guy from our school, and her reaction was nuclear. No discussion, just pack your things and get out. So I did. I spent the rest of my senior year sleeping on a friend's lumpy pull-out couch, working part-time at a breakfast place to scrape together cash. Morning shifts before school, night shifts after. I'd come home smelling like hash browns and regret. But I made it. I got through high school, worked through college with no help from my family, and eventually landed a solid job in logistics. I even bought myself a tiny fixer-upper by the coast. It's not much, but it's mine. Every tile, every loose floorboard, I earned it. That place saved me. It became my escape. I'd spend weekends there alone listening to waves instead of people talking over me. I painted the walls with colors I liked, played music loud, walked barefoot across old wooden floors without getting yelled at. Peace is something you don't realize you need until you live without it for years. Then came my sister Lila. Lila is 6 years younger and somehow 10 years more entitled. Always been the golden child. When she got pregnant in her second year of college, Mom welcomed her back with open arms. Lila didn't finish her degree, didn't try, and her boyfriend Finn. He moved in too. He's the kind of guy who thinks ambition is a personality flaw. No job, no drive. Just endless hours of video games and Reddit rabbit holes. Meanwhile, Mom pays for everything: their food, rent, car insurance, baby gear. The works. And guess who gets ignored for doing everything on her own? Yep, me. We hadn't really spoken in months, maybe a holiday text here and there. I kept my distance for my sanity. But last Sunday, while I was having coffee by the bay windows of my house, Mom called. Now she never calls, unless she needs something. So I picked up, and the small talk lasted barely 60 seconds before she said it. Lila and Finn are getting married, and they want your house. I blinked, thinking I misheard. What? They need a stable home for the baby. And you already have an apartment in the city. You don't need the beach house. I choked on my coffee. Wait, are you telling me you want me to just give them my house? Yes, Casey, don't be dramatic. That word dramatic hit like a slap. I took a breath. Mom, I worked for that house. You weren't around when I was eating instant noodles for dinner or falling asleep in my work uniform. Why would you think I'd give it away? Because family helps each other. I almost laughed. Family, you threw me out at 17 for dating someone. She sighed, annoyed. That was different. You were being rebellious. Lila is just going through a tough time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So being a pregnant dropout with a lazy partner was going through a tough time. But falling in love as a teenager was an exile-worthy offense. I told her no. A firm, unwavering no. That didn't go over well. She accused me of holding a grudge, said I was punishing Lila for being the favorite. I reminded her that I was punished by her. I said if Lila and Finn wanted a house, they should work for one, like I did. She hung up on me. Before she did, she warned me to reconsider. I didn't. That week, I started getting messages. First from Lila. She said I was heartless and putting her child at risk. Then Finn chimed in saying he always looked up to me and hoped I'd think about the bigger picture. I didn't reply. Then came the guilt trip emails from Mom. She laid it on thick how I was financially stable and Lila needed a fresh start. How the baby shouldn't be punished. How this could bring us closer. I stayed silent. Because here's the thing I've learned, that silence speaks volumes. It keeps the peace, but it also protects your boundaries. But that silence didn't last. Because 2 days later, I got a ping from my security app. Motion detected at my beach house. I opened the feed expecting to see maybe a raccoon or a delivery guy. Nope, it was Lila and Finn. Finn had a crowbar. He was prying at my back door. Lila was on lookout. My stomach dropped, my hands went cold. I grabbed my phone and called the police. The dispatcher kept me calm while officers headed out. I watched helpless as Lila whispered something urgently to Finn, who hissed back that it was her fault they had to do this because she couldn't convince me. The cops arrived minutes later. Lila and Finn tried to bolt. Didn't make it far. Lila sobbed to the officers that it was a misunderstanding, that she thought she had permission. I sent them the footage, audio and all. Finn was arrested for attempted burglary. Lila was charged as an accessory. I gave my statement and went home shaken. And then right on cue, Mom called. She was furious, said I overreacted, that I should have just let it go, that they're kids. I reminded her that Lila's 23, Finn's 25, old enough to get engaged, old enough to break into someone's house apparently. She accused me of being heartless, said family doesn't call the cops on family. I said family doesn't try to steal from you either. She hung up. I changed the locks, upgraded my security system, and poured myself a glass of wine. Because I knew this wasn't over. But I also knew this time I wasn't backing down. After the break-in, things were quiet for about 24 hours. I actually thought for a moment that maybe they'd gotten the message. Maybe the shock of being arrested would knock some sense into Lila and Finn. But of course I was wrong. The next day, Mom started calling. Not once, not twice. She called 6 times before noon. When I didn't answer, she left voicemails that swung between sobbing and screaming. One minute, she was begging me to forgive Lila. The next, she was accusing me of destroying the family. According to her, I was ruining my sister's life just to prove a point. They're facing serious charges, she said in one message, and you could stop it all. Drop the charges. Just give them the house. That's all they want. Like that was supposed to sound reasonable. I blocked her number after the 6th voicemail. She started calling from other numbers' landline burner phones, even Lila's friends. I stopped answering anything that wasn't saved in my contacts. Then she showed up at my apartment. I'd just gotten back from work, tired and still reeling from the whole ordeal, when someone knocked at the door. I checked the peephole, and there she was, arms crossed, jaw set, like she was ready for war. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. I leaned against the frame and crossed my arms, mimicking her posture. I didn't say anything. She didn't wait long to start. "You're tearing this family apart," she said, like it was a script she'd rehearsed. "I'm protecting what's mine," I replied flatly. "They're just kids, Casey. They made a mistake. Don't let this ruin everything." "They're adults," I corrected her. "They're getting married and having a baby, remember? You can't have it both ways. Either they're responsible for their actions or they're not ready to be parents." Her face twisted, but she kept going. "They were desperate. You backed them into a corner. What else were they supposed to do? Not commit a felony," I snapped. She flinched, but it didn't stop her. "You're being so cruel. You think you're punishing them, but you're punishing the baby, your niece. She'll grow up knowing you turned your back on her." I laughed quietly, bitterly. "You turned your back on me at 17. Remember, I didn't have anyone. And I didn't break into people's homes. I worked, I struggled. I figured it out." She went quiet, just for a second. Then she whispered, "If you don't do this for Lila, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." I held her gaze. "If I do this for Lila, I'll be giving up everything I built, everything I sacrificed for. That's what I'd regret." She stormed off without another word. Later that night, I got a text from Lila, "You've ruined my life." For a split second, I felt it, that old reflex, that guilt. That voice in my head that always made me second-guess myself, the one my family had trained into me since I was a teenager. But then I remembered that text was coming from someone who literally stood on my porch and watched her fiancé try to break down my door with a crowbar. I texted back, "No, you ruined your own life. And maybe you should think about how you're going to take care of a kid when you can't even respect boundaries." It felt cold, but it was honest. And I was done sugarcoating the truth just to protect their feelings. Then came the next wave, social media. I'd hoped foolishly that they'd keep this whole thing private. But of course not. That would have required accountability. Lila posted a photo of herself standing outside some dingy apartment building holding her pregnant belly like she was starring in a soap opera. The caption, "Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst." I stared at the screen in disbelief. She left out the part about the attempted burglary, naturally. Left out the crowbar, the cops, the criminal charges. In her version, I was just some heartless sister letting a pregnant woman and her unborn child suffer in the streets. The comments flooded in. People I hadn't spoken to in years, friends of hers, distant relatives, even former classmates piled on. How could your sister do that to you? Disgusting. She has a second home and can't even help her own family. Some of the messages were nastier than others. A few even hinted that maybe someone should go talk to her or show up and make her see reason. That's when I realized this wasn't just drama anymore. This was dangerous. I took screenshots of everything. Every comment, every post, every private message. Then I called a lawyer. He didn't even flinch when I explained the situation. "This isn't the first family harassment case I've seen," he said. "You'd be surprised how common this is when money or property gets involved." He helped me file for a restraining order against Lila and Finn. We also drafted a cease and desist letter warning them to take down the posts or face legal consequences for defamation and harassment. I didn't want to escalate things, but they left me no choice. The restraining order went through without much trouble. The evidence was overwhelming, and once Lila got the legal notice, she finally took down the posts. But the damage had already been done. People knew where my beach house was. The post included a photo taken from the porch right before the break-in. Now strangers were speculating about its value, talking about how nice it must be to be rich and cold-hearted. That night, I drove to the beach house. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to feel that it was still mine. The air was salty and cool. The sky was pink and orange with sunset. I stood on the porch for a long time, listening to the wind and the waves and letting it all sink in. I wasn't just protecting a house. I was protecting everything it stood for. The hours I worked, the nights I cried, the jobs I juggled, the meals I skipped, the dreams I held onto when no one else believed in me. That house was more than wood and paint. It was proof that I'd made it out, that I'd built something, that I'd survived. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not the same people who left me behind, take it from me. Not again. It took exactly 3 days for my mother to restart the campaign like clockwork, like she couldn't help herself. The restraining order shut Lila and Finn up for the moment, but Mom wasn't named in the paperwork. She knew it. And she was going to use that loophole like a crowbar of her own. Saturday morning, I drove back to the beach house to clean up the garden. There was something therapeutic about pulling weeds and trimming branches. I liked the silence, the work, the smell of damp soil. I was halfway through clearing out the flower beds when I heard a car crunch into the gravel driveway. My stomach tensed. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my jeans. And there she was, again. Same self-righteous look, same tight-lipped expression, like she was walking into a courtroom to argue her way into sainthood. I didn't say a word. Just stood there with the garden shears dangling in one hand, dirt under my nails, heart beating steady. She stepped out of the car and crossed her arms. "You're making this so much worse than it has to be," she started. I raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I made them bring a crowbar. Her jaw clenched. They were desperate. I turned back toward the flower bed. So was I at 17. No one brought me a crowbar or a house. She didn't like that. "Casey, this isn't about the past. This is about now. Your sister is struggling. She's falling apart. She needs support." She had it. She had years of it. Free rent, free food, no job. You bent over backward. And now you want me to do the same because she pushed her luck too far. "She's pregnant," she snapped. "Not my fault. I raised you better than this," she hissed. That did it. I turned around, locked eyes with her, and said, "You didn't raise me. You kicked me out and I raised myself." She blinked, thrown off for just a second, then recovered. "This isn't about who made mistakes. It's about fixing what's broken." I tilted my head. "And what exactly do you want fixed? Your reputation? The version of our family you try to parade around to your church friends? You want me to hand over the one thing in my life that wasn't poisoned just so you can feel like a good mother again?" Her face twisted, and for once she didn't have a comeback. She got back in her car without another word and drove off, tires spitting gravel. But of course, she wasn't done. Later that night, I got a string of messages from mutual acquaintances, some who hadn't spoken to me in years. They'd seen a new post from Lila. Not the pitiful apartment photos this time. This one was of my beach house. The caption was vague but strategic. "This is the place my sister thinks matters more than family. I would have loved to raise my baby here, but I guess some people forget where they come from. The comments were brutal. People guessing the location, commenting on the view, debating the square footage. Some sent me direct messages. So what if she made mistakes? She's still your sister. Maybe you don't need it, but she clearly does. Hope your conscience keeps you warm. That was the last straw. The public sympathy circus, the subtle digs, the leaking of personal photos, it crossed the line from emotional manipulation into harassment. I called my lawyer again. He reviewed the post and sent another cease and desist. He also suggested filing for a permanent injunction if they kept pushing. I agreed. I was done playing defense. Every move from this point on would be calculated. Quiet, legal, unforgiving. But that night, lying in bed, something kept gnawing at me. Not guilt, not sadness, just this ache, the kind you get when you realize someone you once loved doesn't see you as a person anymore. Just a resource, a vending machine with no voice, a vault full of things they didn't earn but still believed they deserved. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Exhausted from the years of playing the role of the problem child, the black sheep, the one who didn't come home for Christmas, the one who was too busy or too cold. I used to think if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, maybe they'd see me. Maybe they'd stop pretending I didn't exist unless they needed something. But now I saw it clearly. I was never invisible. I was just inconvenient. The next morning, I wrote a post of my own. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't mean, just the truth. I talked about being kicked out at 17 for having a boyfriend. I described sleeping on a couch while finishing high school, working double shifts, skipping meals, and figuring out student loans on my own. I mentioned saving for years to buy the beach house, working late nights, side gigs, going without vacations or luxuries so I could build something permanent, something mine. Then I talked about Lila, about how she dropped out of college, never worked, how Finn lived rent-free, jobless, directionless. I explained how they asked me to gift them the house and when I refused, tried to break in with a crowbar. I didn't embellish. I posted a screenshot of the security footage Finn on my porch tool in hand. Lila in the background glancing nervously down the street. I ended it simply, "This house is not a vacation home. It's a symbol of everything I fought for when no one fought for me. I owe no one an apology for protecting it." The post went viral. Not internet viral, but enough for the people in our town, our circles, our shared world to see it. The narrative shifted. Comments poured in with support. Strangers and friends alike saying things like, "Good for you, boundaries matter." They played stupid games. Of course, not everyone was supportive. A few people still tried to guilt me. Said I should have kept it private, said family matters shouldn't be aired online. But I'd stayed quiet for years, and silence had only protected them. Lila didn't take it well. She sent me a message that started with, "How could you?" and ended with, "You've ruined everything." I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on the porch of my beach house that night, wrapped in a hoodie, legs curled under me, watching the moonlight on the water. The waves didn't care about guilt trips or social media or family drama. They kept rolling in steady and unbothered. I sat there until the chill sank into my bones and the wine glass in my hand was empty. Peace, I realized, isn't always quiet. Sometimes it comes after the storm when you finally decide to stop being a casualty of someone else's chaos. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. After I posted the truth, there was a lull, a quiet that didn't feel like peace, but more like the moment before the next wave hits. The kind that makes your chest tighten because you know something's coming, you just don't know from which direction. I tried to focus on work, but my inbox was still filling with messages from old classmates, distant cousins, even former teachers. Some wrote long paragraphs about how proud they were that I stood up for myself. Others just sent a thumbs up or a simple finally. It was strange. People who hadn't said my name in years suddenly had opinions about my life. And still, none of that felt heavier than the silence coming from my mother. She didn't call. She didn't text. Not a single word since the last time she showed up in my driveway. At first, I was relieved. But that silence, it wasn't surrender. It was the eye of the storm. Then came the Facebook post. Mom shared a long, winding paragraph with a photo of Lila as a toddler sitting on her lap, Finn's arm around her shoulders, and the caption, "Family is the heart of everything. No matter what people say, we'll always protect ours, even when others try to tear us apart." It didn't mention my name, but everyone knew. The comments were predictable. People offered sympathy. A few asked what happened. Some just sent emojis, hearts, and prayers like they could fix what Mom had spent years breaking. She was trying to spin it again, playing the martyr, the misunderstood mother, the one who tried her best but was betrayed by her ungrateful daughter. And that might have worked before the internet connected everyone, before I found my voice. But not now. I didn't respond, not publicly, not privately. Instead, I started planning. I wasn't just going to wait for the next emotional ambush. I was going to be ready. I called my lawyer and told him I wanted the restraining order extended to include Mom. Not because she'd broken a law, but because the harassment was escalating in new forms. He reviewed the social media posts, the context, the history. He nodded. "We can draft it," he said. "She might not like it, but that's not your problem." That weekend, I went to the beach house again. The sky was gray, the air thick with the kind of coastal humidity that settles in your bones. I stepped onto the porch and felt something was off. The flower pots by the door were moved. Not knocked over, just shifted slightly. I froze. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Then I noticed the mailbox. Inside was a plain envelope, no return address, no stamp, just my name. I took it inside, locked the door, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper. No letter, no explanation, just a photo. One I'd never seen before. It was me, 17, sitting on the curb outside my childhood home, duffel bag beside me, head down. The night I got kicked out. I stared at the photo for a long time. My throat tightened. My hands shook. Who took it? Why now? It felt like a threat, a reminder, a warning. I texted my lawyer a photo of it, told him I found it in the mailbox. He responded quickly. "Keep it. This proves intimidation. I'll include it in the filing." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I got another message from Lila. This time it wasn't angry. It was short, plain. "Can we talk, just us? No drama." I didn't know what game she was playing, but I agreed on one condition. Public place, neutral ground. 1 hour and I was recording everything. She agreed. We met at a cafe near the pier. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from staying up late. The kind that sinks into your skin after weeks of pretending you have control over something that's been spiraling out of your hands. She sat across from me without ordering anything. No makeup, ponytail, wringing her fingers the way she used to when she was nervous as a kid. For a second, I saw my little sister, the version of her before entitlement and guilt tactics and Facebook lies. "I didn't send the photo," she said before I could speak. I nodded. "Okay, but I know who did." My stomach tightened. "Mom." She didn't answer, just looked away, which was answer enough. She exhaled slowly. She found it in an old folder, said she kept it as a reminder of how hard love was necessary sometimes. I felt something in me go cold. "I'm sorry," Lila said. And it actually sounded real. I knew about the break-in. I knew it was wrong. I told him not to do it. But he said it was the only way. I didn't speak. He left, she added. "Finn packed up last week, said it was too much, that I ruined his life." I almost laughed. "That's rich." She half smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He never planned to stay. I see that now. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then she said the thing I didn't expect. "I don't want your house." I raised my eyebrows. "I wanted what you had. Not the building, the freedom, the peace, the way people respected you. I thought if I had something of yours, I'd feel what you feel." I stared at her, unsure what to say. "And I'm sorry for what I did, for what we did. I can't undo it. But I'm not asking for that anymore. I'm just asking you to believe me when I say, I'm done playing Mom's game." I believed her. For the first time in years, I really did. I stood, dropped a 20 on the table for my untouched tea and said, "Then prove it." She nodded. I walked out. Did I forgive her? Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I believed she was telling the truth, and that was enough for now. That evening, I updated the locks on my apartment too. Not because of fear, but because I was done giving anyone a key to parts of my life they hadn't earned. Mom sent another text that night, just one sentence. "You'll regret turning your back on us." I blocked her. Then I walked out onto the balcony, looked up at the sky streaked with stars, and whispered to myself, not angrily, not bitterly, just calm and certain. "No, Mom, you'll regret never turning around." After the meeting with Lila, the weight in my chest shifted. It didn't disappear, but it settled less like a stone, more like a scar I could finally breathe around. I didn't tell anyone about our conversation, not even my closest friends. Some moments aren't meant to be shared. Some truths need to sit quietly away from gossip and analysis so you can figure out what they actually mean. I didn't know if we'd ever be close again or if that apology was the first and last time she'd meet me halfway. But it wasn't about rebuilding something broken. It was about knowing I could walk away without dragging shame behind me like a rusted chain. She'd said her piece. I'd heard it. That was enough. Mom, however, was not finished. Blocking her didn't stop her from finding new ways to circle back. Old email addresses I'd forgotten she had, unknown numbers. I traced back to prepaid phones, even messages sent through other people's social accounts. People I hadn't spoken to in years. The messages were all versions of the same theme: "You're hurting your family. This isn't who you are. We just want things to go back to normal." But that was the thing, there was no normal. There never had been. Still, the barrage wore on me. Even steel bends if you press hard enough long enough. I found myself walking through my apartment like it was someone else's space, distracted and numb. I skipped dinner, missed calls from friends, let dishes pile in the sink. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was the slow ache of realization that no matter what boundary I built, someone would always try to climb over it with a sob story and a guilt hook. I hadn't spent all these years surviving to become the custodian of other people's messes. And then the final twist came quiet, small, like a whisper with a knife behind it. A letter arrived at my workplace. Handwritten envelope. No return address, no stamps. Just Casey in my mother's familiar handwriting. I opened it out of instinct, thinking it might be another manipulation attempt. It wasn't. It was legal documentation. A copy of a will. She'd made Lila the primary beneficiary of everything. Her house, her accounts, her belongings, everything with any monetary value. But there was one line added just for me, highlighted in yellow as if to make sure I didn't miss it. To my eldest daughter, Casey, I leave nothing as she has made it clear she no longer considers herself part of this family. I read the sentence twice. It didn't hurt like it should have. It just confirmed what I'd already known deep in my bones. She never saw me as a daughter, just a mirror. And when I stopped reflecting what she wanted to see, she shattered me. I folded the paper neatly and put it back in the envelope. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I tucked it in a drawer next to my passport, a reminder that some goodbyes don't come with closure, they come with paperwork. But the betrayal didn't end there. A few days later, I got a message from my boss. A complaint had been filed against me anonymously, alleging workplace misconduct using company time and resources for personal legal matters. It was laughable, clearly false, but they had to investigate. Protocol. At first, I didn't make the connection. I thought maybe someone from the outside had twisted the narrative online. Maybe some random person took Lila's posts too far. Then HR mentioned the timestamp on the email. It matched the day and time I visited my lawyer. The day after my mother had sent me that will. The pit in my stomach returned like an old friend. I checked the logs. The email had been sent from a new account, but the syntax, the phrasing, it was too familiar. Too deliberate. I'd seen that type of passive-aggressive punctuation all my life. The polite venom, the structured nastiness wrapped in faux concern. It was her. I couldn't prove it beyond a doubt, but I knew. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel betrayed. I felt nothing, because nothing was left. The HR investigation cleared me, of course. My record was clean. The whole thing was labeled a non-issue. But the feeling lingered, that sense that no matter what I did, my mother would keep throwing stones from the shadows, trying to chip away at the life I'd built. That weekend, I drove to the beach house again. This time, I didn't go to check locks or change cameras. I went to sit. I parked, left my phone in the car, and walked barefoot down to the shore. The tide was low, the water cool, the sand packed firm under my steps. I let the waves touch my toes. I stared out at the horizon until my thoughts quieted, until my breath found a rhythm that felt like mine again. Then I walked back, opened the trunk of my car, and pulled out a plain cardboard box. Inside were old photos, hand-me-down jewelry I never wore. Letters Mom had written to me during the short few months after I was kicked out. Letters I used to think meant something. Back then, I kept them like proof that maybe she did care, maybe someday we'd find our way back. I carried the box into the house and sat at the fireplace. One by one, I tossed the contents into the flames. Not out of hatred, not out of revenge, out of clarity. Because keeping pieces of someone who only shows up to hurt you isn't love. It's emotional hoarding. It's clinging to a hope that's already withered. And I was done carrying dead weight. The fire crackled as the edges of photos curled and turned to ash. Faces disappeared, signatures faded. The past surrendered without a fight. And when the box was empty, I sat back and whispered, "That's enough." Not in anger, in release. No more justifying, no more explaining, no more waiting for apologies from people who don't believe they did anything wrong. That night, I poured a drink, turned on my favorite record, and stood by the window with the sea breeze drifting in. The house smelled like pine and salt and faint smoke. It smelled like closure. I wasn't healed, not completely. Healing doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens slowly, quietly, through choices that protect your peace instead of proving your point. But I'd made the most important choice of all. I chose me. A week passed after I burned the box. Then two. No calls, no emails, no new numbers trying to sneak into my voicemail. The silence was strange, but not heavy like before. This time it felt earned, solid, like the stillness after a storm that finally ran out of wind. I didn't let my guard down. I still double-checked the locks, still scanned the driveway when I got home, still had the security system on alert. But I wasn't living in fear anymore. I was just being smart. Being prepared wasn't paranoia, it was self-respect. Then one quiet Thursday morning, I received a letter. Not from Mom, not from Lila, from the county courthouse. A hearing was scheduled. Apparently, Mom had filed a motion, something vague and legally flimsy, that claimed I'd been withholding emotional support from a dependent relative in a time of need. It didn't make sense. It wasn't even about money, just another tactic to drag me into her web, to see if I'd flinch, if I'd cave. I laughed when I read it. A bitter kind of laugh, but real. She'd weaponized her own desperation into paperwork. Thought maybe the system would be her next crowbar. My lawyer handled it with ease, filed a dismissal, and made sure the court recognized it for what it was: frivolous harassment. But that moment became my breaking point. Not because of the hearing, not even because of the pettiness, but because it proved something that deep down I'd been denying for years. My mother wasn't ever going to change. There wasn't going to be an apology or a late-in-life awakening or a moment where she saw me, really saw me, and decided to make things right. That wasn't coming. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted control. And when she couldn't have it, she wanted chaos. So I made my final decision. I went completely no contact, legally, permanently. My lawyer drafted an official cease contact document. Sent it to her directly. No more letters, no more visits, no third-party messages from cousins or friends of friends. If she tried, we'd press charges for harassment. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I finally understood that healing doesn't always look like talking things out. Sometimes healing means closing a door and never unlocking it again, even if the person on the other side is your own mother. And then something surprising happened. I started feeling lighter. Not all at once, but slowly, like my shoulders weren't fighting the weight of 1,000 invisible hands tugging me back into guilt. I started waking up without dread in my chest. I cooked breakfast with music on again, started laughing at random things in the shower, The kind of laughter that doesn't need an audience. The kind that rises out of nowhere and tells you you're going to be okay. I began filling my life with people who brought peace instead of pressure. My coworker Lila, who invited me to her book club even though I hadn't touched fiction in years. James, my neighbor at the beach house, who fixed his porch light and brought me homemade cider just because. We weren't close friends, but they reminded me that not all connections come with conditions. That family isn't just blood. It's consistency, safety, shared silence without judgment. Eventually, Lila messaged me one last time. I know we're not close. I know I can't fix everything. But I wanted you to know I found a job. I'm saving, and I'm going to therapy. I'm trying. Thank you for making me wake up even if it hurt. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I archived it. Not to ignore her, not to erase it, but because I had nothing more to say, and for once that was okay. Let her walk her path. I hoped it would be a better one, but I didn't owe her any more of mine. The beach house, once a symbol of safety and solitude, became something else, something brighter. I invited a few friends over, hosted a quiet dinner by the water candles flickering on the deck. We laughed. We talked about dreams, not drama. I watched the way the moonlight hit the waves and thought, this is what family could feel like, if we choose it, if we protect it. I started making changes. Repainted the kitchen walls, replaced the old deck boards, bought new curtains, nothing fancy, just ones that let in more light. Every fix, every nail, every brush stroke felt like reclaiming my space, my story. Not from Mom, not from Lila, from the version of myself that thought I had to keep proving I was worth love. I didn't need to prove anything, not anymore. And one afternoon, while trimming back the hedges near the mailbox, I found an old garden stake buried in the dirt. I brushed off the soil and laughed quietly. It was rusted, forgotten. But it reminded me of something simple and profound. Roots are important, but so is knowing when to prune. So I kept the stake, washed it off, set it by the front steps, not as decoration, but as a reminder. Even things buried too long in bad soil can be cleaned, can be moved, can start over. I stood there on the porch, sun on my face, listening to the wind carry the sound of waves through the trees. And I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. My story didn't end with vengeance or loss. It ended with freedom. And the fire I thought they tried to put out, it never died. It just learned how to burn without needing to be seen. Story 2. When Mom had additional children with my stepdad, she ejected me. Then appeared and demanded funds for their college education. She hounded me until I obtained a restraining order, and she was taken into custody when I refused. I'm a man in my early 30s who is doing rather well for himself. Got a job. I worked so hard to get a lovely apartment, the sort of things that should indicate that you've done it correctly. However, the past has a terrible way of surfacing when you least expect it. Seems to smell like entitlement and despair. My childhood. For a while, it was just my mother and I. Dad never played a part, departed before my birth, based on my understanding. And what do you know, Mom was everything for a time. She had 2 jobs. She was there, always exhausted. We were not wealthy. It was steady, but not by much. She helped me with my homework and read to me, I recall. When she tucked me in, I could smell her cheap perfume. Those are the recollections that would eventually cause you mental distress. Make you question whether you're imagining the positive aspects. She then met her stepfather when I was around 10. Since that's his name, let's call him Dale. Furthermore, he is not deserving of my protection or secrecy. At first, Dale was all right. I suppose it was to my advantage that Quiet didn't interact with me too often. Mom appeared content, as if a burden had been removed. Her smile widened. All right, this may be nice, I thought. The twins came about a year later. A girl and a boy. The dynamic of the house abruptly changed, and not in a subtle way. It was as though a switch had been flicked. Before I was her world mom. After all, I was a useless piece of furniture from a past existence. She gave the twins and Dale all of her focus energy and already limited finances. I became a burden, then an afterthought. There was more than one major dramatic occurrence. Not initially, The fading was gradual. My birthdays stopped happening, happenings at school. Dale's got a thing, honey. Additionally, the twins are a lot of effort. Not much to say. Could you hold it down? The infants are dozing off. Always, my needs came second. Dale simply made it possible. Although he never told me outright that I wasn't wanted, he never gave me the impression that I was. He would treat me as though I were an unwanted visitor who had stayed too long. This continued for years. I developed my ability to support myself, keep quiet, invisible. I often ate supper by myself, completed my homework by myself. I handled adolescent angst largely on my own. Mom had too much on her plate, too exhausted. She is too preoccupied with her new family. The few occasions I made an effort to connect with her, she would either refocus the conversation on the twins or her eyes would glaze off. Their demands their most recent milestone. Talking to a courteous stranger who was only waiting for you to go was like that. I was 16 at the time, not even old enough to be legally independent, but evidently old enough to be thrown away. I can still clearly recall it. It was a Tuesday. After working part-time at the grocery shop, I returned home. Dale and Mom were seated at the kitchen table, both of them wearing serious expressions. It never, ever indicates anything positive that we must speak in such a manner. We have been working on the figures. Mom began to look away from me. Dale simply gazed at the tabletop as if it were the universe's secret. You know, honey, things are pretty tight. Dale's hours are being reduced somewhat as the twins grow older. With my backpack falling off my shoulder, I simply stood there. I could see where this was headed. I wasn't a moron. Your grandparents, she said, turning to face me at last. Her eyes, however, were steely. You're almost an adult now, and they have that extra room. You're accountable. Are you throwing me out? I said. There was no question. At last, Dale's voice was flat. Son, it's not throwing you out. It is only a pragmatic arrangement. We no longer have the funds to adequately help you. There you'd do better. More room for them. He intended. I turned to face my mom. Nothing was there. Not depressed. I have no regrets. Just a somber conclusion. It seemed as though she had already grieved my passing years prior and was only now beginning to complete the paperwork. How about school? Despite myself, my friends, and my career, I asked, my voice trembling a little. It's not too far for your grandparents to live. Dismissively, Mom said, you can make it work. You're resourceful, inventive. That was the reason they left me. I argued. God, I argued. I shouted. I hate to say it, but I may have begged a little. How could she do this? I questioned her. Was I meaning nothing? It's all a swirl of rage and a tight knot of frigid betrayal. For the most part, Dale kept silent and let her handle the grunt job. He simply stated, it's for the best, for everyone, for their everyone, at one point. Perhaps they didn't appear guilty at all. What got me was that they appeared relieved. I moved in with my maternal grandparents a week later. They were calm, traditional, and decent folks. I could see the disappointment in their eyes, yet they took me in without any fuss, with their daughter, not with me. They didn't discuss it much, but when she thought I wasn't looking, Grandma would occasionally just shake her head and sigh. I moved schools for my final year of high school and retained my employment. Hell was the place. A new school, no companions, residing in a home that had the atmosphere of a museum. However, I was adamant that I would not allow them to feel the joy of my failure. I put in a lot of effort, received good marks, and managed to get into a state college. I made the error of supposing that my mother may genuinely care at that point. I needed a little assistance with books, tuition, etc. I referred to her as vaginal steak. She said, "Oh, honey." When she was going to let me down, she employed her phony, lovely voice. You know the twins, but we'd be happy to help. Dale's car recently broke down, Sky has dance classes, and Kyle needs braces. Simply said, nothing is spare. My knuckles were white from holding the phone so tightly. I tried to sound even as I said, Mom. I was accepted to college. She chirped, "This is important and we're so proud of you. You're resourceful, though. It will come to you. Obtain further loans, maybe." Resourceful. Once more, there it was. There, leave the prison. You get a free pass for being a pathetic parent. I ended the call. With her, I had moved past tears. I gave my mom's younger sister, my Aunt Carol, a call. In the family, Carol had always been the more sensible one. She paid attention. She let out a sigh. "All right, honey, let's see what we can do," she said. She also did. She sent me some money when she could, and she co-signed by herself. It was her, not my own mother, who had faith in me. It was difficult in college, juggling 2 jobs, studying obsessively, hardly getting much sleep. But that chat with Mom comes to me every time I consider giving up. That casual rejection, and it strengthened my need for vengeance as a strong motivation. I got a good job once I graduated, and then I got a better one. I paid off all of my loans, including the one that Aunt Carol assisted me with after working my way up. Every year, on the occasion of my graduation, I sent her flowers. All by myself, I created a nice life. Thanks to them, no. Go ahead 15 years or so. I hadn't seen Dale or Mom in a long time. An occasional Christmas card. If she remembered, she may have called me on my birthday to ask for an update, as if she were conducting a study. I was short, courteous, and aloof. They were aware of my success, and Carol most likely shared some information throughout the years in the hopes of making my mother proud or whatever. She had no idea. Then on a Saturday afternoon around 3 months ago, the doorbell rings. I have no expectations. My stomach dropped when I gazed through the people. They are. On my porch, Mom and Dale are standing. I had to open the door even though I nearly didn't. Mom exclaimed, "Look at you," grinning as if we had been closest friends for ages. It's a beautiful sight. She attempted to intervene for an embrace. I avoided my old reactions. "What are you looking for?" I inquired. "Don't be kind." "No. Good to see you." Dale's feet shuffled. "Son, may we enter?" It has been a while. I reluctantly opened the hallway to them, refused to give them a seat. They surveyed the area, a bit too clearly impressed Mom. Dale seemed uneasy, as he always did when he wasn't in total command of the circumstance. Mom then got right to the point. I promptly cut off a couple clumsy efforts at small conversation. "You seem to be doing really well for yourself, we've heard. We're really pleased." I responded, "Get to the point." She and Dale looked at each other. Then she threw herself into it. She added, adopting a plaintive tone, "It's the twins." I had a vivid memory. In the autumn, both of them will begin college. You are aware of the current cost. I simply gazed at her while we conversed. "As long as you're at ease," Dale added. "Perhaps you might contribute a little to their tuition. Family, you know, is helpful." In fact, he added, "Family, family. Family supports family." I laughed. And really unsightly one. Bubble up within me. "Are you serious?" I inquired. "Of course we're serious," Mom remarked in an overly optimistic tone. "After all, they are your brother and sister." I lost my temper at that point. "My sister and brother," I said, raising my voice. "They were the ones who made it possible for me to be kicked out at the age of 16. The people you put before your own kid. That sister and brother." Mom winced. "That's unfair now. We took the necessary action. We were having trouble. You were having trouble." I nearly yelled. "I was a child. You expelled me. I should move in with my grandparents, you advised me. So it was impossible to annoy you. Because your ideal new family was inconvenienced by me. You weren't expelled by us." Dale attempted to speak a little louder. "For your advantage, it was a mutual arrangement. Both parties agree." "To my advantage." That's when I laughed. "Do you believe I consented to being left behind? Do you really believe that working my way through high school and college, begging for scraps while you gave them your all, helped me? You were always adored by us." With tears in her eyes, Mom murmured, "Crocodile sheds tears." "Love." I wasn't buying it. I spat out the word. Is that what you call love? I pleaded with you for a little college assistance when I requested. What were you saying? The twins need this. I see. That's what the twins need. You're resourceful. Work things out. Keep it in mind. Mom, do you... She broke down in tears. We aired errors. Now I was pacing. No, that wasn't an error. It was a decision. Every single damn time you choose them over me. And now that I've achieved something, in spite of you, in spite of everything, you're brave. The utter insolence of coming here and requesting money for them. They're decent children. Dale looked at the floor and murmured, They are worthy of a chance. And I didn't. I spun around on him. How about my opportunity? Who gave me assistance? Not you, not her. I got aid from my aunt. When my own mother threw me out, my grandparents provided me with a home over my head. You two did absolutely nothing. The debate circled back and forth, attempting to guilt-trip me after that. I am confronting them about their hypocrisy. Mom sobbed more, accusing me of being cold and harsh. After attempting to mediate the conflict, Dale became defensive and said that I was unappreciative of the years. I was raised to be resentful by them. That's when I nearly lost it. Leave now. At last, I spoke in a raspy voice. Leave my house. However, the cash. Mom cried. Just a tiny bit. Not a single penny, I said coldly. I gave you my blood and you still made your choice years ago. Live with it. I took a step back. Leave now before I call the police. Are you trespassing too? Dale stiffened his chest, rising slightly in defiance. You wouldn't dare, he muttered. I looked him straight in the eye, voice steady. Try me. They left. Mom kept crying, her eyes filled with betrayal every time she looked at me. Dale didn't say another word, just walked out with that same bitter, furious look on his face. After they went, I was trembling for at least an hour, with anger and adrenaline, not fear. All those years of being the resourceful one and of keeping my mouth shut. Everything simply poured out. Damn, that seemed essential, even though it wasn't pretty. It was many days before I heard from them. Perhaps they received the message I thought. Isn't that stupid? The phone call then began. Mom generally cries, begs, gets upset, begs again, and accuses me of being a bad son and of leaving my family. I could have spread the irony on toast because it was that thick. I stopped taking her calls. She began leaving voicemails that were lengthy and rambling. I banned their phone numbers. I assumed it would stop there. Then it got out of hand around 2 weeks ago. My boss and a few clients were meeting with me at work. I seem agitated when my receptionist buzzes. A lady is present, she says. She is your mom. She is agitated and insistent on seeing you. I excused myself. My heart is racing. She was there when I went to the lobby, seeming unkempt, red-rimmed eyes. As soon as she spotted me, she began to shout. I can't be ignored. You must assist us. In front of my coworkers, the receptionists, and everyone else, your brother and sister need you. I felt angry and embarrassed. I took hold of her arm, perhaps a bit harsher than I had planned, and led her to a conference room off to the side. Do you believe you're accomplishing something? I must speak with you, she sobbed. You have blocked us and refused to answer your phone. This is what I do. You can't just come here and yell. There was a scene. She made sure everyone knew before security finally let her out. She was my mother, penniless and destitute, and I was her rich, cold-hearted son. My supervisor was sympathetic, externally. However, the harm had already been done. She arrived at my place that weekend yelling and hammering on the door. I could see my neighbors staring out their windows. I dialed the police. They were there to speak with her. Told her to go. She went out. But not before yelling that I'm sorry. She thought I was dead. Goodbye. I assumed Dale's automobile would be parked a few hours away from my house the next day, simply sitting there. Intimidating strategy. That must have been the final straw. I visited a lawyer. Due to their harassment, I currently have a restraining order against both of them. It seemed unreal, obtaining a protection order against my mother. However, what option did I have? They refused to halt. They wouldn't go away from me. They were interfering with my profession, my life, and my mental health, all because I refused to pay for the golden kids they picked instead of me. So here I am, hired a lawyer. A restraining order was obtained. I have an intractable knot in my gut. Aita, because you told them to go lost, for severing all communication with them when they left me and returned pleading, I think I know the solution. My mind is a complete mess, though, following the incident at work and the continuous bombardment. All I had to do was set everything down. Tell me, am I the jerk for finally putting a line in the sand and using the legal system to defend it? Because in spite of everything, there's a small voice asking whether I went too far right now. Despite the fact that my entire reasoning self is screaming no. Wow, that update. All right, let me start by saying thank you to everyone who read and commented on my post. That type of response was unexpected. It helps to hear it from someone outside of your own echo chamber of anger, even though the majority of you have already validated what I kind of knew in my gut. I will admit that the use of strong language and a lot of NTA regarding my mother and Dale was quite validating. I'll try to answer some of the questions that folks ask. Some of you inquired as to why my grandparents didn't step in more to help my mother. They were traditional. They offered me a safe haven and supplied for me. However, they avoided conflict, particularly with their own daughter. They were disappointed with her, but they did so more by shaking their heads and letting out a sorrowful sigh than by confronting her. Son Grandma used to tell me that she made her bed. We don't have to approve of the bedding she chose. Instead of battling my issues with her, they supported me by being steady. They died quietly a few years after I graduated from college. They are missed. They were decent individuals in a humiliating circumstance. Carol, my aunt, was a saint. She is. By no means was she affluent. She used everything she had to aid me back then, though. This whole situation hasn't improved her connection with her mother, which is already tense. It seems that Mom contacted Carol in an attempt to get her to speak sense into me following the altercation at my place. You reap what you sow, sis, Carol reportedly warned her. He owes you absolutely nothing. So yes, Carol is also firmly on my side. Next week, we're eating supper. Stepdad, Dale. What's the matter with him? He has a horrible sense of entitlement and is a quintessential facilitator. I was simply inconvenient at the time, and he was all about his new family with Mom. Although he didn't intentionally mistreat me, he was aloof, contemptuous, and made it obvious that I wasn't truly a member of his family. Now believing they are entitled anything, he is riding Mom's coattails of illusion. It was pitiful when he parked close to my house in an attempt to intimidate me. At heart, he is a coward. The twins. Some inquired about them. To be honest, I don't really know them. When I left, they were little children. They are not related to me. Are they decent children? Bad kids become spoiled. I don't know. Honestly, I don't give a damn. They are not my responsibility. They belong to Mom and Dad. They'll see why I don't want to interact with their parents if they're nice. Goodbye to them as well if they are like their parents. Harsh. That's where I am, perhaps. I enjoyed reading your comments, particularly the one where you had a similar experience. Oh, how many of us out there have dysfunctional families? Didn't cause me to think deeply enough to question what I was doing. It strengthened my determination, if anything. Some of you use phrases like parental estrangement, emotional neglect, and financial abuse. Yes, those do fit. That tiny voice that attempts to whisper is silenced when it sees that name. Perhaps you're being too strict. I'm not being overly strict. After years of being treated like a throwaway object, I'm responding. Emotionally, the choice to obtain the restraining order wasn't simple. Doing this to your own mother is a terrible thing. Logically, though, it was the final step. They refused to halt. I needed to keep my peace. There is no mechanism for deciding whether or not to assist them. That door is barred, bolted, and welded shut. How to convince them that it was the main consideration in the decision-making process. I'm sure it was a lovely experience for them when the restraining order was issued, and yes, it was served by a process server. On the advice of several of you and my lawyer, I took a few further actions. One told my employer. My employer presented them with a copy of the restraining order during our official meeting with HR. Give a brief explanation of the circumstances, in a professional manner. They were surprisingly helpful. My identity has been tagged with security by HR, and they know to contact the police right away if either Dale or Mom arrive there. Although humiliating, it was essential. 2. My home security system was improved by home security. Better sensors and more cameras. I don't want to take any chances following Dell's brief drive-by, even though it sounds excessive. 3. Documentation. I was urged to document everything by my lawyer. Every strange automobile sighting, every contact attempt, anything. I now have a little black book. I feel like a fucking spy, but I want the evidence if they break the order. 4. Social media blocked. Proactively. Although I don't use it much, I made sure that every platform blocks them and any known flying monkeys. They were only eliminating all options since the restraining order was filed almost a week and a half ago, not because they were attempting to get in touch with me there. There hasn't been any noise, no phone calls. Their numbers are obviously banned, however, they could attempt using someone else's. No surprise visits. No one has spotted Dale lurking. I suppose it's the quiet after the storm, but the silence is tight. As for the second shoe dropping, I'm waiting. With that degree of entitlement and delusion people like them, do they not simply give up, or perhaps they are finally frightened by the legal documents? I'm not sure, and Carol mentioned that after being served, her mother contacted her once more. Mom seemed to be upset, angry, and then playing the victim by accusing me of attempting to ruin her. Carol claimed to have informed her mother, "You're ruining yourself." He's only defending himself against you. I adore that woman, my God. Carol says so. Then Mom began to complain that no one could relate and that the twins would be crushed if they were unable to attend their desired universities. Carol simply hung up. Thus, there is a tenuous peace for the time being. Or at the very least, no open combat. I'm not unwinding. Even if I still occasionally glance over my shoulder, it's better than before. Once again, I appreciate you listening to my tirade and offering the guidance. Knowing that you're not the only one experiencing this type of madness is strangely reassuring. I'll provide another update if anything noteworthy occurs, such as if they truly uphold the restraining order over the long run, or more likely if one of them makes a foolish decision and gets into additional legal issues. I just want to get back to my life for the time being. The second update. Okay. A few months have passed since my previous update. 3 months or so have passed since the restraining order was issued. Many of you specifically requested a follow-up. Here it is then. Take out your popcorn. Because there was a somewhat dramatic finale to this chapter, albeit perhaps not the one I was anticipating. Thus, there was nothing for around the first 6 weeks. I was on the verge of believing that the legal documents could have worked, that their thick brains had been pierced by the danger of real repercussions. I even began to loosen up a little. Then around 1.5 months ago, I quit my job. It's becoming dark in the evening. I'm ready to open my car in the parking garage when I hear, "You can't do this to us." My blood pressure went through the roof. Mom was the one. Her eyes were wild, her hair was a jumble, and she appeared unhinged as she sprang out from behind a concrete pillar. Close. As if she had been sleeping in them, she rubbed them. There was no sign of Dale. I'm grateful. You can't be here, Mom, I said immediately, reaching for my phone while attempting to maintain a steady voice. A restraining order is in place. You are aware of that. Recalling all the terrifying tales of traffic infractions, I was making a conscious effort to maintain my distance. I will continue to speak with my own son, notwithstanding a piece of paper. She screamed and stepped in my direction. We're doomed. The twins. You have destroyed their future. They are unable to attend college. They are sad and all of their pals are leaving. Mom, that's not my problem. It's yours. Slowly backing up, I said, your decisions were your own. You must now depart immediately. 911 was being dialed by my fingertips. Then she lunged. She reached for my arm, but it wasn't a full-on tackle. You owe us. You were my entire universe after everything I did for you as a child. I was thrown out by you. I pulled my arm away and shouted back. She faltered. You're bothering me after throwing me out. It's over. Until you assist us, it won't be over. She let out a scream. People were becoming aware. A pair stopped and gazed as they made their way to their car. This was rapidly becoming worse. My office building's security guard must have been notified by someone or seen her loitering on the cameras at that precise moment. I'm grateful for air, and they immediately became vigilant. Mom activated the guard. He is my son. His goal is to ruin his family. The guard didn't mince words. The cops are coming, ma'am. I need you to accompany me. She broke down in tears, then the sobs I was so familiar with. Nobody gets it. I'm a decent mom. He is ruthless. He lacks compassion. In fact, like a kid having a fit, she attempted to sit on the ground. Within minutes, the police showed up. There was a scene. She cried out, accusing me. I was attempting to appear composed, although my insides were racing as I stood there with my phone still in hand. I presented the restraining order to them. They spoke with her. She continued to rage because she was willfully breaking a court order, and since the report mentioned her prior trespassing at my place of employment. This time, they did more than simply warn her. She was taken into custody and placed in handcuffs. Read her rights. She was yelling about my being a monster and about unfairness. Seeing my own mother being placed in the back of a police vehicle was unreal. After she phoned him from her one phone conversation, Dale arrived at the station later looking agitated. I had to make a statement, therefore my lawyer was with me. In the waiting room, Dale made an attempt to get close to me. This is what you did. Are you content now? She's a complete disaster. My attorney took over. Keep your distance from my customer, sir. The restraining order also names you. Any interaction may be interpreted as a transgression. Although Dale appeared on the verge of blowing up, he retreated while grumbling to himself. Mother was accused of breaking a restraining order. Additionally, I believe she resisted arrest since she seemed to be hostile toward the cops. She was imprisoned for the night. The following morning, Dale helped her out. That has serious repercussions. For them, it became real when she was arrested. The paper order hadn't, I believe. According to Aunt Carol, who was reprimanded by a distraught Dale for supporting her mother's actions. Carol also reprimanded Dale. That was the last straw for Mom. Not because I've realized my mistake, but because my life is finished. My path is woeful. A few weeks later, the court date arrived. I was represented by my attorney. I was not required to be present. Fortunately, Mom said something like no contest. She was fined and had to attend therapy. I doubt that will be helpful. Additionally, the restraining order was strengthened with even more stringent conditions, and a warning that jail time would be inevitable if there was another infraction. Since then, no questions have been raised. Complete quiet. Aunt Carol, my sole surviving, if unwilling conduit to that side of the family drama, says Dale is attempting to put the pieces back together. The twins did not attend the universities of their dreams. It appears like they are attending a community college and working part-time, which is, to be honest, what most typical children do. Perhaps something positive will happen for Mommy and Daddy when they are unable or unwilling to pay a huge payment. Their parents obviously never taught them the worth of $1 in respect to me, but perhaps they will learn it now. Carol said Mom is quiet and depressed. It seems like she finally realized the humiliation of being detained and the potential legal repercussions. She has stopped ranting. She's simply broken. Dale is reportedly making an effort to maintain order, but he is also acknowledging that their ideal retirement plan, that is me, has fallen apart. Does any of this make me feel bad? concerning her arrest regarding her being broken. No, I don't. Some may find it harsh, but she was the one who caused all of this. She made decisions over decades. That went straight to that moment in the back of a police cruiser in the parking garage. I just responded to what she did. I took precautions. If she is damaged, it is because the brick wall of reality finally broke her fantasies. That, I think, is the story. Since the arrest, the restraining order has been in effect and is still in place. My phone number has changed, just to be safe. My employer is alert and aware. I have excellent home security. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has read, supported me, and given me advice. When it was at its worst, it meant a lot. On this front, I don't expect any further developments. If Dale and Mom have learned anything, it's that the law is on my side and I won't back down. If they haven't, the repercussions will only worsen for them. I think this will be my last post on it. It's time for me to let go of their drama and demands and enjoy the life I've created for myself. I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I've gone through, but it's finished. I appreciate everything. Story 3. My parents took my college funds and expelled me. My brother told me it was God's plan when his girlfriend became pregnant. Now that they were homeless, they called and begged for assistance. It's 20:06 a.m., and I'm Alice, right now. Grew raised in a house that from the outside appeared to be very typical. Parents had strong religious beliefs. Everything has a connection to God's purpose or will. Gene was my younger brother. Gene was always a little strange, even as children. He simply took stuff. Not only things, but also opportunity, space, and attention. He was constantly excused by his parents, said he was misinterpreted or overly sensitive. Growing up, I concentrated on leaving and obtaining an education, achieving success on my own. My parents allegedly set up a college fund for the two of us. Gene, however, was never much interested in anything other than what was simple. My future was certain, and that fund seemed like my ticket out. They had always mentioned it, but it was in an account under their names. Regarding your schooling, when Gene was about 17, things became quite tight. He was still living at home and alternating between part-time, dead-end jobs that he couldn't retain. He began dating this girl named Flora. She didn't come from our neighborhood, didn't have relatives close by, and quickly became attached to Gene and consequently our home. She was initially silent, but it was clear that she was only waiting for a chance. Her parents found her to be charming, a positive impact on Gene. Our property was a hotel with free meals and washing, and I observed someone searching for a comfy place to land. Without anybody mentioning it directly, Flora essentially moved in. Her belongings just showed up. She was constantly present, using the shower, eating our meals, and occupying the couch. The only remaining privacy I had was in my room. I had to share my space more and get around her being everywhere, thus an argument broke out. I voiced my displeasure to my parents. They would advise me to be more hospitable. Family helps family, despite the fact that she was not related. When I questioned Gene about why I didn't want his girlfriend living with us for free, he would simply shrug or become defensive. His parents consistently supported him by accusing me of selfishness. When I began applying to colleges, the strain increased. I was concentrating, working hard, and achieving academic success. Gene did nothing. Parents frequently brought up the college fund, expressing their pride in my perseverance and the fact that the funds were there for me. Flora, meantime, was growing louder and more insistent. Late at night, she and Gene would argue loudly, waking others. My parents would simply sigh and urge me to sleep again. The home seemed to be dwindling. My parents were allowing Gene and Flora to take control, and it is mayhem, putting me in a tight spot. Flora then became pregnant. One evening, Flora was weeping as I entered the living room. Gene appeared astonished, and my parents appeared oddly at ease, almost tranquil. I was informed that Flora was expecting. Gene, who appeared to have just been informed that the sky was falling, acknowledged that he was the father. My parents went into damage control mode right away, but not in the way you might think. It had nothing to do with Gene's gaffe or their plans to help him. It was about this marvel, this new baby. Flora was suddenly family. She was assimilated right away and became more significant than before. Her needs became the main emphasis. Their requirements. When my mother began discussing their need for space and how my room was the largest available area, I felt sick to my stomach. How ideal a nursery it would be. As simple as that. My chamber. There was no longer a spot in that house that felt like mine. I gave a strong shove back. They couldn't just decide that I told them, that I required that space. I was submitting college applications. This is where I lived. My father interrupted me to say that a new life was more essential. I stated it at that point. After glancing at Jean, Flora, and my parents, I said that I couldn't pretend that everything was fine and that I wouldn't let Jean, who had just shown that he couldn't even take care of himself, into my home with his girlfriend and unplanned kid who had essentially broken in. I declared that I would not contribute to the chaos that triggered them. My mother broke down in tears and accused me of being callous. My father received that icy stare. He receives before establishing the legislation. I have two options, he said. Embrace Flora and the infant as members of the family and assist them, or leave immediately. I paused for a moment. I glanced at Flora, who was observing me with phony tears, and Jean, who refused to look into my eyes. I glanced at my parents. Their expressions conveyed no affection, only the hope that I would fold as I always had. However, something broke. All those years of coming in second, of being instructed to make room for the invasion of my personal space, it simply boiled over. I refused to accept it, I told them. I wouldn't act as though Jean was suddenly in charge or that this was a joyful occasion. They were picking this mess over me, I replied. My father got up. His cheeks turned crimson. He gestured toward the door. So immediately, get out. I wasn't quick enough for him. He approached me, took a firm hold of my arm, and began dragging me in the direction of the front door. I withdrew my arm. Things became physical at that point. He pushed me in the direction of the corridor. I fell and struck the wall. He took hold of my arm once again, this time tighter. I raised my hands to keep him off me and twisted away. He was yelling and accusing me of being unappreciative, inconsiderate. My mother was yelling. From the living room, Jean and Flora were only observing. My father persisted in attempting to push me in the direction of the door. I pushed him away only to make room for him to leave me. He swung in my direction. It was blocked by me. Once more he lunged. I ducked under him and headed for the door. My mother shouted after me as I grabbed for the doorknob. All right, proceed. Don't expect a dime, either. The college fund. It's gone. It was necessary for the nursery, for the infant. Ellis, it's God's plan. God has this plan for you. On the doorknob, my hand froze. Lost. The college fund. This is what my future was used for Jane and Flora's room. Unexpected child. For a circumstance they brought about. And God's plan was made possible by my parents. They used that as an excuse to expel me, for taking away my future. I looked back in their direction. My brother Flora and my parents. Anger, condemnation, and in my parents' eyes, that dreadful self-righteous conviction were all mixed together on their faces. They genuinely thought they were doing the right thing, approved by their religion. I didn't speak again. They slammed the door behind me as I opened it and left. I stood outside the door, locked. It was growing dark. My phone only contained the clothing I was wearing, not carrying a wallet. Nothing, just outdoors. Expelled. Fund for college. Lost. The only thing I had left for my future was taken away by my family who had just thrown me out. It was a terrible first night. I simply strolled, had no idea where to go, ended up sleeping in the parking lot of a strip mall behind a dumpster. Woke up numb and chilly. Hunger struck quickly. I had no acquaintances. I could seek assistance. The parents of no close friends would take in a random child who had been expelled by his family. It went into survival mode. A public library caught my eye. Looked up resources on a computer. Food banks, shelters, whatever. It was too much. Discovered a soup kitchen. Have you eaten? It was my first meal in more than a day. It had an ashy flavor. For the following several days, I alternated between the soup kitchen, the library, and looking for a safe spot to rest at night. I was scared, tired, and dirty. I realized I couldn't continue to act that way. I needed a job. Do you have any work? I began approaching any company that seemed like it may recruit someone without any references, experience, or address. Received several rejections. Daily kilometers of walking. A greasy spoon eatery at last. Felt sorry for me. A dishwasher was required. A few shifts begin with cash beneath the table. It was exhausting. Work was hot and never ending, but the money paid for cheap, bad food. And finally, a few nights in a filthy pay-per-week motel room that smelled of desperation and stale smoke. I was a machine at work. Took all of the available shifts. I saved as much money as I could. I didn't purchase anything that I didn't need. Discovered a rooming house scenario that was marginally better. Shared restroom. It had thin walls, but it was slightly cleaner and more sturdy. Began sifting through applications in search of better jobs. Misrepresented my address. First used the diner as a point of reference. The proprietor of the rooming home then provided me with a loose vouch for me. In order to subsist and save money, it needed months of arduous, laborious work at low-wage jobs, sometimes 2 at once, consuming instant ramen. Anything, whatever was most affordable. My parents were not contacted. I was not contacted by them. It wasn't an SMS or a call. Nothing. They obviously meant it. I had left. Erased their God's plan, which left me homeless and suffering while they used my money to construct a nursery. Something hard and icy was cemented inside me by that realization. In the ensuing years, I gradually constructed something. Landed a somewhat better warehouse job. Enough money saved for a used automobile. Moved into a little dilapidated apartment of my own. No university, of course. The door was securely closed. However, I gained up abilities while working. Worked my way up. Took part-time education at a community college. I'm paying for them myself. Dollar for dollar. Not in the direction of a degree. Only useful abilities. Welding. Fundamental mechanics. Things that were more lucrative. I did more than simply get by. I started a new life from scratch. They merely handed me what they had taken. They were only a former existence. I buried a horrible memory deep. I made no touch. I modified my phone number, removed social media accounts they were aware of, disappeared. From my point of view, they were no longer there. I've gone out that door for 8 years now. Silence for 8 years. I spent 8 years starting from scratch in my own life. I'm steady, but I'm not wealthy. I was hired to work as a maintenance supervisor on a little house that I paid cash for. I had no debt saved. My life is tranquil. Take care of household tasks. That's all. It seemed like an other lifetime in the past. Right up until yesterday. Someone called me. Unknown figure. I was anticipating a work call, but I normally leave such on voicemail. I replied that it was my mother. Tears filled her voice, making it unsteady. At first, I remained silent. Simply listen. She was sometimes incoherent and rambling. The home something. I'm losing it. I need assistance. Apparently, my dad was ill. Flora and Jean. Although she didn't mention them much, it seemed like they were unable to assist. Perhaps a contributing factor. The home. I was evicted from the house where they used my college funds to construct a nursery. They referred to the dwelling as holy and sacred. They went crazy. Foreclosure. Poor financial decisions. I'm not familiar with the specifics. She was a complete mess. She was in tears as she described how they had nowhere to go, how unsure they were about what to do, how homelessness was affecting them. After a lull of 8 years, of not knowing if I was dead or living, they needed something, which is why they were phoning, because their scheme failed. Finally, she gasped out my name and asked if I had any money, if I could assist them, and if they could stay with me. I felt no sympathy. Neither did I feel angry. Not at all. Only a chilly clarity. I remembered that night sleeping behind the garbage and standing outside empty. I considered what she had said. "Ellis, it's God's plan. God has this plan for you." She was awaiting my next comment. I'm still weeping on the phone. I inhaled. Calmly, I used her identical words. I said in a firm voice, "Mom, when you expelled me and stole my college funds, do you recall what you told me?" On the other end, there was silence, aside from her labored breathing. "It was God's purpose for me, you said," I went on, "to leave me alone and let me work things out for myself. Perhaps this is God's plan for you to lose the house and deal with this," I remarked. I didn't hold off till she answered. I simply ended the call. They still haven't returned my call. I have no idea what they are doing. I have no idea where they are. Did I make a mistake, should refuse to assist, and turn their own words against them? They took my future and threw me away, faithfully justified it, and crawled back. Only when their own circumstances grew dire. They want me to solve their problem after we haven't spoken for 8 years, after they made mine and abandoned me. What exactly do you do in such a circumstance? All right, update 1. The sheer number of reactions to the initial post was unexpected. Go through a few of them. Most individuals appear to understand it. Some didn't, attempting to forgive and move on or raise family. However, it's obvious that those individuals didn't see the purpose of being expelled and having my future stolen. It was more than just a falling out. It was financial ruin and desertion that was excused by a perverted religious belief. Many people wanted additional details regarding the brother and girlfriend relationship before the pregnancy and expulsion. Yes, there were warning signs about Jean and Flora everywhere. My parents just disregarded them or assumed I would. Flora was not at work. Jean had no occupations to hold down. Before the kid was born, they were squandering my parents' money. They would frequently borrow money from my parents, which caused conflict since my parents would subsequently reduce family spending or ask me to contribute more. I recall debating with my dad about why I should pay for food while Jean and Flora wasted money on pointless stuff, despite the fact that I was still a student who was focused on school. All he would say was that I had promise and they were having trouble. The timetable for pregnancy. It seems to have happened soon after Flora had fully settled in. A few months, perhaps. It wasn't a dedicated, long-term romance that ended in an unexpected baby. It seemed more like two people who had no strategy experienced a significant setback and instantly turned to my parents for support. And my parents made this decision right away. They had to give up everything, including my future, to accept an unintended pregnancy that resulted from their carelessness. The defense of God's plan was not an impromptu idea. In terms of savings, I didn't have any substantial personal funds. I used the meager money I earned from part-time jobs to cover normal adolescent costs or to help out around the home when my parents requested. My parents constantly encouraged me to concentrate on my studies and get ready for college applications. They promised me repeatedly that the college fund was my money for school and that they would manage it for me. That was the plan they made plain. They would use the money to pay for the significant expenditure. All I had to do was concentrate on getting in. Since it was explicitly stated that the fund would pay for my living expenses and school, I was never encouraged to accumulate sizable personal funds for either. Losing it was therefore complete destruction. They promised the alleged principal resource, therefore I didn't have a backup ready. Indeed, there was no communication for 8 years. No birthday greetings, no attempts to get in touch with me via old acquaintances. I lost contact with some of the people I did know, and I didn't have many close ones in that town anyhow. Don't go to old haunts. Nothing. They seemed to consciously want me to disappear and be forgotten. Yesterday, I just sat there for a bit after hanging up the phone. All of that hidden history came to light as a result of their appeal. The physical weariness of those initial months, the threat of homelessness, the ongoing struggle to make ends meet, and the sense of complete betrayal about the education money. Money wasn't the only factor. It served as a representation of their alleged commitment to my future. They promised me something, then cruelly tore it away and utilized it for the very reason they threw me out. The idea of assisting them and allowing them into the secure life I had created for myself. It seemed like a transgression. It was like allowing those who destroyed my history into my present and maybe destroy it once more. They didn't apologize for what they'd done, therefore they didn't get in touch. I was the only viable option available when they contacted out because they were having problems and needed a solution. After a lull of 8 years, they had no right to come to me for assistance. Right now, they forfeited. They slammed the door in my face after choosing Jean and Flora and their God's plan over my future and fundamental well-being. The rationale behind their usage of the God's plan line was not petty. Rather, it was the only language they appeared to comprehend and the foundation for their justification of cruelty. I was returning to them their own perverted reasoning. If my suffering was part of a divine purpose, perhaps their current situation was part of a divine plan as well, according to religion. It resulted directly from their decisions and actions. When they decided to expel me and embezzle my education funds, the decision was already made. I just had the chance to clearly explain to them the repercussions of their behavior during yesterday's call. Nothing was worth considering. Later that day, they gave another call. The number was not the same as the one Mom had previously used. Although it came from the same broad area code, I didn't identify it either. I looked at the screen and paused for a moment. I assumed it was them. "It was my dad," I replied. His voice was not as strong as it had been 8 years prior. However, the faint undertone of entitlement persisted despite the tremor and the underlying anticipation. His voice was tight with tension as he jumped right into it, wasting no time in niceties. He began to tell about how horrible things were, how unexpected everything was, and how he needed help. He partially repeated what his mother had said about the foreclosure, the loss of the house, and their limited choices. He didn't bring up Mom's earlier call to me, her breakdown, or my reply to her. It seemed purposeful, as like he was attempting a new approach, perhaps in the hopes that I hadn't already wounded her, or that a direct plea from him would have a different effect. He was depicting a situation of extreme need, attempting to make their current predicament the only thing that mattered, obviously, in an attempt to arouse pity. I prevented him from gaining momentum. A prepared appeal was not going to be heard by me. I interrupted him somewhat abruptly and in a calm voice. I said I talked to Mom. She informed me of the house's current state. He paused in the middle. He most likely knew that the reset button had failed, but he bounced back fast, his voice accelerating once again, and he was now fully focused on the details of their catastrophe. As if the request were less important, he added that they wanted a somewhere to reside for a short time. A location to find a short-term fix for their suddenly urgent issue. Using the same framework, I responded to him as I did to her. I said, "Dad, there's no other way to respond. Do you recall kicking me out of the house 8 years ago?" He didn't answer right away. For a beat, there was quiet. "And do you recall what your mother said that evening?" Despite the silence around my education fund, I persisted in pushing through. About me living alone. It was God's plan, she claimed. His voice altered when I said that. "Don't do this, Ellis." His voice cracked slightly as he began. "Are your parents present?" "We are related. The night you snatched my future and chose Jean and Flora, you ceased to be my parents. You made your decision," I informed him. "You used your faith to validate it. While you exploited my money to create a life for them, you claimed that God had intended for me to be homeless and without everything." I took a moment to process that. Perhaps losing your home and being left with nothing to work out on your own is God's plan for you right now. When he snapped, the final traces of begging disappeared to be replaced by outrage and rage. His voice rose as he began to yell, hurling accusations down the phone line, accusing me of being cold-hearted, callous, and unchristian for leaving my own family in their hour of need. He shouted that I owed them, that they had taken care of me, provided for me, and fed me, and that you had taken care of me just to abandon me when it was opportune. I spoke above his yelling, maintaining a forceful tone without raising my voice. I wasn't merely thrown out by you. The only resource I had to create a future was taken by you. God's plan was used to justify it, and I was left to fend for myself. I went swimming. You're going downhill. 8 years of hardship and a lost future that I had to restore with arduous labor are what you owe me. I'm not going to leave you. I'm just giving it back, embracing the plan of God, just as you instructed. He continued to yell a litany of demands and charges. I listened a moment more. The sound was annoying, but I was no longer influenced by what he said. They were just the frantic sounds of someone who was having to deal with the fallout from their own deeds. I no longer had to listen. I simply ended the call. They made many more attempts to contact from different numbers, and my mother even left a few brief, heartfelt voicemails begging me not to bring up the subject of them sleeping in their car. I only listened to the first few seconds and didn't respond. The numbers were blocked by me. Since then, no communication. I've returned to a calm existence, as if a loose end had been tied off at last, ruthlessly but successfully. I have no idea where they are or what they are doing. I haven't made an effort to find out. I no longer have that difficulty. They got here because of their decisions. Most likely this is it, unless something really unforeseen occurs. They probably don't have another move. We appreciate everyone who read and left a comment. Putting everything down and receiving affirmation that I wasn't insane for sticking to my principles was helpful. I don't anticipate anything major, but we'll keep you informed if it does. The second update. About 6 months have passed since I published the first update and the original article. Since I hung up on my dad and banned their numbers, I have had no touch with either of my parents. No letters, no phone calls, and no attempts to get in touch with me via any back channels, which would have been challenging otherwise, considering how severe my ties were. Many years ago. Again, there is just quiet. If they were able to find lodging, I'm not sure where they ended up. Are they still having trouble or what? I have not looked for information. It seems odd to say, but following the initial brief interruption of their calls, their absence became the norm. I also don't know what's going on with my brother Gene and Flora. It was clear from my mom's short, sad conversation that they weren't supporting her and my dad, which wasn't shocking, considering their past of reliance and carelessness. I don't know any details, though. My parents are as distant from me as they are from me. That night, 8 years ago, they were included in the package deal. The people who received the resources that I had stolen and who were participating in the mayhem by remaining silent and present when I was expelled were the cause. My own life has proceeded along its course. Work is steady. It's a nice house. I've been concentrating on some remodeling tasks that I had been putting off. It's silent, predictable. That's it. Most likely this is the last update. When I declined to participate and they stopped communicating, the matter was resolved. Nothing else needs to be said. Once again, I want to thank everyone who read the article. It was helpful, albeit unexpected, to put it out there and receive that response. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace? Drop your story in the comments. And if you've ever been underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe. We see you, and we've got more stories like this coming every week. Thanks for watching.